Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as the BRICS summit wraps up in Johannesburg, the bloc of emerging nations hails the historic entry of 6 new members. Ethiopia and Egypt are amongst those joining the club from next January. Also, Algeria sends an envoy to Niger to help with diplomatic talks with the country's junta as regional bloc ECOWAS grows increasingly frustrated with negotiations. Meanwhile, Russian support in the country remains rooted despite the death of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. And despite an economic crisis in Tunisia, tourism does seem to be finally picking up, but the return of visitors hasn't driven out the shadow of shock over the island of Jerba, months after it suffered an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. But first, Ethiopia and Egypt are amongst the 6 developing nations invited to join the BRICS bloc. Iran, Argentina, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia will also be driving the expansion of the group. The decision was taken as current BRICS members, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, met in Johannesburg for a high-stakes summit which wrapped up on Thursday. Opening their doors adds economic heft to the group. Erin Bates brings us more.
If BRICS is a party, not everyone is invited just yet. But 2 nations on the African continent, Egypt and Ethiopia, are set to join the group as of 2024. They, along with South Africa, will represent the continent in the now increased group. It will be up by more than double, 11 members as of next year. And the AU chair spoke to France 24 on the sidelines of the 15th BRICS summit, saying that numbers count. Here's what one analyst had to say.
Both Ethiopia and Egypt are really important countries within the continent. Egypt is the 2nd largest economy in Africa, very well connected not only with the rest of the African continent, but particularly with the Middle East and Northern African regions, and very strong bilateral relations with most of BRICS members. Ethiopia is a country of more than 100 million people, is the headquarters of the African Union, is increasingly looking into increasing its influence with the region, and is also located in a very strategic position where it's very close to the bottleneck in terms of the connection towards the Suez Canal.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was also present at the BRICS summit on invitation. He admitted that Africa is unrepresented in terms of global bodies, particularly in terms of the financial sector. And with global transactions and the currencies used to make them coming up squarely in the discussions here in Johannesburg over the last 3 days, it's going to be an important topic moving forward. He said the world is changing and global governance needs to change with it. It's clear that Africa will be part of those conversations.
Erin Bates there for us in Johannesburg. Now, voting was extended into Thursday, and so a second day in Zimbabwe's presidential and legislative election. This after delays that authorities put down to the late printing of ballot papers. Fewer than a quarter of polling stations opened on time on Wednesday, and the exercise has been described by some as the most chaotic polls in the country's history. Police say that they've arrested 41 activists who'd been monitoring the votes. The coalition, led by Nelson Chamisa, accused President Emmerson Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party of trying to rig the exercise. Results are due to be announced by next Tuesday. And video sharing platform TikTok has agreed to moderate its content in Kenya and set up an office in the country to coordinate operations there. The Chinese-owned app is under pressure in Kenya, but Parliament has received a petition to ban TikTok because of allegedly promoting obscenity. Meanwhile, Somalia has recently announced that it is banning the platform for being used by terrorists to spread propaganda. And Algeria is sending an envoy to Niger to help with diplomatic talks with the country's junta. Meanwhile, regional bloc ECOWAS has been trying to negotiate a way forward in the wake of the military takeover last month that ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. It's also threatened force as a last resort and may be growing frustrated with talks after rejecting soldiers' proposed 3-year timeline for a transition back to democracy. Sam Mednick brings us more from Niamey.
There is currently a standoff between West African regional bloc known as ECOWAS and Niger's new military leaders. The junta said that they are not going anywhere. They have appointed a new government and they have given 3-year transitional timeline to restore constitutional order. ECOWAS has said that 3 years is way too much. They've rejected that and have called it provocative. While ECOWAS says diplomatic channels are still open, they say they are not going to wait forever, and they have threatened the use of military force if constitutional order is not reinstated. They have said that right now the ball is in the junta's court. Meanwhile, some soldiers say that divisions are starting to show within the junta as well as within the Presidential Guard, the unit that overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum. Some soldiers say that if there was a military intervention, it's unclear if the soldiers would stick around and fight for the junta or if they might flee. Sahel experts say that the ECOWAS is counting on this external pressure from the sanctions that have been imposed, economic as well as travel sanctions, as well as these internal divisions and pressure to force the junta's hand.
Now, shortly after the coup in Niger, crowds were seen waving Russian flags in the country. Despite the news on Wednesday that the Russian boss of the Wagner mercenary group is presumed dead, some in Niger still see the outfit as a preferable alternative to traditional Western allies like France. Researchers have blamed the country's turning to the Kremlin on a continent-wide disinformation campaign led by the Kremlin. Camille Nedlek tells us more.
The latest fashion in Niamey, a Russian flag. Ever since the military takeover in July, this tailor started making them to show his support for Russian intervention in Niger.
We pray that Allah strengthens the relationship with Wagner to continue the deal. If the relationship is good and strong, it's possible they'll continue with the deal even after Yevgeny Prigozhin's death.
At pro-junta rallies and in the streets of the capital, the colours of the former coloniser, France, have slowly been replaced with the colours of the Kremlin. It's part of a wider trend in the region. Other former French colonies, Mali and Burkina Faso, have also turned away from Paris in the wake of military coups, turning instead to Moscow. For locals here, the presumed death of ex-Wagner leader Evgeny Prigozhin in a plane crash changes little.
I think that here in Niger, we wish for Russia and Wagner to come here. You asked if now that the Wagner leader is dead, this will create problems. The answer is no. There won't be any problems. They can come. There won't be any problems. And we wish for them to come.
A recent study revealed that Russia has targeted dozens of countries across the continent with disinformation campaigns designed to undermine democracy and foment distrust of Western powers.
Well, despite an economic crisis in Tunisia, tourism does seem to be finally picking up, by 66% on last year to be precise. But there are still some communities, like those on the island of Djerba, which suffered an anti-Semitic terrorist attack in May, where the improvements can only go so far in helping with their recovery. Our team reports.
In May, when we last met Ariel, a Jewish jeweler in the Medina of Djerba, he was still in shock over the attack on the Ghriba synagogue. Now, 4 months later, he's working hard to keep up with the tourists and the marriage season. The recovery in business is bittersweet.
To be honest, we're happy. We have work. Life goes on. It's true that there is some sadness, but that's life. May those who died rest in peace, but life goes on.
On the island, hotels say they have an almost 100% occupancy rate. But in the Jewish quarter of Lahara, things aren't the same as in previous years.
These are the best chicken skewers of the islands, trust me. There's still been a drop in those coming, but that's to be expected because the Jewish diaspora is still a bit scared.
In recent years, the island has diversified its tourism attractions beyond beaches and hotels. In the residential neighborhood of Riyadh, the exquisite murals of Djerba attract both foreign and domestic visitors. But the real star of this open museum is the guide, Yassine, who knows every corner.
You see this car? It's in 3D. You can take a photo from this side and the other one. The artist who painted it is well known for these kinds of works.
He lives in this neighborhood and has seen how the street art has helped revive interest in the area. Thanks to the tourism, Samira, his grandmother, was able to open a cafe.
Djerba really boosted tourism. We have visitors from all countries who come by our area.
Most of the foreign visitors on the island are French, and there have been 152,000 of these tourists this year alone.
Well, Gabon is gearing up for elections this weekend as President Ali Bongo seeks a third term. Campaigning is wrapping up, but Bongo's main opponent, Albert Ondo Ossa, is promising supporters that he is the man to break the country out of its status quo. Our team reports.
24 hours after he was selected to represent the Gabonese opposition in the presidential elections on August 26, Albert Ondo Ossa set out to win over voters. The 69-year-old presents himself as the candidate of the disadvantaged.
I am here for the hungry. I am here for the poor. And I am here for the homeless.
Albert Ondo Ossa is a trained economist and formerly served as minister under Omar Bongo Ondimba, the father of the outgoing president. Ossa's manifesto focuses on improvements to the purchasing power of the Gabonese people.
Within 7 months, the prices of fuel and electricity will be reduced. In less than a year, all pensioners will be paid. The expenses will be used to rebuild Gabon. So united we will stand, because in 3 months you will be smiling.
Albert Ondo Ossa is a member of Alternance 2023. The coalition brings together opposition political parties and civil society organizations. Ossa emerged as its candidate of choice after 5 other heavyweights like Alexandre Barrault-Chambrier and Paulette Misambo withdraw following a secret ballot. The exercise was meant to prevent the dispersion of opposition votes in the single-round presidential elections.
Alternance 2023 have chosen a candidate by consensus. We follow the will of this political group.
Alternance 2023 has come in for some criticism for its prioritization of the presidential and municipal elections to the detriment of the legislative elections. Observers hold that the platform may not attain its desired results with this system.
The people wanted a single candidate. If you say you're going to the elections, who are you obeying? You're going against the will of the people. I'm just saying, in doing that, they're rooting for Ali.
Alternance 2023's platform promises to dissolve the National Assembly if its candidate is elected President of the Republic.
Well, that's it for Eye in Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Till then, take care.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait.
France 24 gives a global perspective that an educated, intelligent, and active viewer is going to want to have to be able to fully understand the issues of the day.
That's why it will always be there to help make sense of world events.
J'ai l'habitude de suivre France 24 partout où je me trouve, et ce grâce à mon smartphone, parce que je ne reste pas souvent devant la télé.
Quand une information circule sur la toile, j'utilise l'application de France 24 pour vérifier l'authenticité.
For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.